The studio lights were warm. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, expectant. Jonathan Roumie sat center stage, calm, composed, but with a spark in his eyes. People thought they knew him. They thought they knew his voice, his face, his role as Jesus in The Chosen. But that night, he revealed something different. It started as laughter. Impressions of Ray Romano, Bob Dylan, perfectly delivered, the crowd roaring. But then it shifted, because Jonathan didn't just come to make people laugh. He came to share a story about faith, a story about risk, a story about building something the world said was impossible. And what he revealed that night, about The Chosen, about God, about courage, left the audience silent. The host smiled, leaning toward him. "Jonathan, people know you as serious, as spiritual, but I hear you've got a hidden talent. Is that true?" Jonathan smirked. "Well, I wouldn't call it hidden, just underused." The crowd chuckled. "Let's hear it," the host pressed. Jonathan leaned back, dropped his voice low, tilted his head, and suddenly, Ray Romano was sitting there. The cadence, the hesitation, the nervous charm, perfect. The audience erupted. He shifted again, his voice roughened, his tone raspy, his body language shifting. And then, Bob Dylan filled the room. The laughter rolled, applause shaking the walls. But Jonathan didn't stay in the moment of comedy. He raised his hand gently, waiting for the room to quiet. "See, impressions are fun," he said. "They make us laugh. They show us how different voices can sound. But the real question is, whose voice do we listen to when it matters most?" The laughter died. The crowd leaned in, and Jonathan began to tell the story. "When The Chosen began," he said, his tone shifting, "nobody believed it could work. A Bible series, independent, funded by regular people. It sounded crazy. Studios didn't want it. Networks didn't trust it. But there was one voice louder than the doubt." The host nodded, curious. "And what voice was that?" Jonathan's gaze was steady. "God's." The room stilled. His voice grew heavier, more grounded. "I was broke. I was questioning my future as an actor. I didn't know what was next. And then came this role, this opportunity. But it wasn't just about acting. It was about faith, about stepping into something bigger than myself." The host leaned closer. "And you thought it would fail?" Jonathan chuckled softly, but there was no humor in his eyes. "Everyone thought it would fail. Crowdfunding, faith-based content, competing with billion-dollar studios. We had nothing but conviction. And even that wavered some nights." The crowd was silent. Jonathan's voice dropped lower. "There were nights I sat alone, asking God, why me? Why this? Why now?" And the only answer I got was, "Trust me." The audience shifted. The air was thick. Jonathan exhaled slowly. "And trust is hard when the world is laughing at you, when they say you'll never make it, when even your own doubts are louder than your prayers." He paused, and in that silence everyone could feel the weight. Then Jonathan leaned forward, his voice firm. "But then something happened, something I'll never forget." He paused. The crowd leaned in. "One night, during the early days of filming, we didn't have enough. Not enough money, not enough resources, not enough hope. And then, suddenly, a donation came in. Not from a millionaire, not from a company, but from a single mom. She sent $20, probably all she had, and wrote, 'I believe in this. I believe in you. Don't quit.'" Jonathan's voice cracked. The crowd gasped. He continued, "That broke me. Because it wasn't about budgets. It wasn't about Hollywood. It was about faith. Faith so strong it gave when it couldn't afford to. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just a show. This was a movement." The room was quiet. Some wiped tears. Others bowed their heads. Jonathan's tone rose, urgent. "Every time we doubted, every time we thought it was over, someone else showed up. Someone prayed. Someone gave. Someone believed. Until what the world called impossible became undeniable." He looked out at the audience, his eyes wet. "And that's when I understood. The voice worth listening to isn't doubt. It isn't fear. It isn't the critics. It's the still, small voice that says, 'Keep going. I'm with you.'" The crowd erupted, applause, cheers, tears. But Jonathan lifted his hand. He wasn't finished. His voice softened. "People ask me about impressions, about voices. And sure, they're fun. Ray Romano, Bob Dylan, whoever. But here's the truth. The most important impression we can ever leave isn't on stage, it's on someone's heart." The crowd stilled again. Jonathan's tone slowed, weighted with meaning. "When you speak kindness, you leave an impression. When you forgive, you leave an impression. When you choose faith over fear, you leave an impression. And those impressions, they last longer than applause, longer than careers, longer than life itself." The audience rose to their feet, clapping, some crying, some cheering. Jonathan smiled faintly. "The Chosen isn't about me. It's not even about the cast or crew. It's about God showing the world that when people come together in faith, mountains move." He stood, lifting his hand slightly as the crowd cheered louder. And maybe tonight, you're sitting here doubting. Maybe you're watching, thinking you don't have enough. Not enough money, not enough strength, not enough faith. But let me tell you, God can take your not enough and turn it into more than enough. The studio thundered with applause. Jonathan bowed his head slightly, humbled, quiet, composed. And the night that began with laughter ended with conviction. Because Jonathan Roumie didn't just show off his Ray Romano and Bob Dylan impressions. He showed the world what it looks like when you listen to the only voice that truly matters. And that night he left an impression that will never fade.